Content: NATO and Africa. Relationship of colonial violence and structural white supremacy. Published just about a month ago. Black Agenda Report by Jibo Sobukwe. All right, I hope I said that right. Let's read. Considering the public media attention and concern about public expansion, possible expansion of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, or Nazis' armed and trained organization, it's worth reminding people that NATO's bloody history in Africa. NATO was founded in 1949 after World War II at a time when African countries were still under the yoke of colonialism. In fact, most of the original founders of NATO had been Africa's principal colonizers, such as UK, France, Portugal, Belgium, Italy, and the USA, as lead NATO organizer and dominant partner. The organization was established as a collective defense against the Soviet Union with the requirement, Article 5, that any attack on one NATO nation was considered an attack on all, therefore requiring a collective response. Since NATO was founded with the purported purpose of halting possible Soviet aggression and stopping the spread of communism, it would seem to follow that after the collapse of the USSR in 1991, there would no longer be a need for NATO. Since then, however, NATO's expanded from the founding 12 to the present 30 member states, many of whom are Eastern European countries, formerly Soviet republics, and Warsaw Pact allies. Today, NATO has become a huge axle in the wheel of the military-industrial complex, controlled by U.S. empire for the purpose of full-spectrum dominance, driven by the ferocious appetites of corporate capital. Colonial Africa as NATO bases. All right. Walter Rodney accurately describes the early foundation of colonial Africa's relationship with NATO, which continues today, as he described in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa.
Needless to say, in the 1950s, when most Africans were still colonial subjects, they had absolutely no control over the utilization of their soil for militaristic ends. Virtually the whole of North Africa was turned into a sphere of operations for NATO, with bases aimed at the Soviet Union. There could have easily developed a nuclear war without African peoples having any knowledge of the matter. The colonial powers actually held military conferences in African cities like Dhaka and Nairobi in the early 1950s, inviting the whites of South Africa and Rhodesia and the government of the USA. Time and time again, the evidence points to this cynical use of Africa to buttress capitalism economically and militarily, and therefore in effect forcing Africa to contribute to its own exploitation. Emphasis added 1.
Emphasis added 1. I'm going to take a very short break so I can fill my coffee. Be right back. And let's continue. Here we go. Kwame Nkrumah already warned in his 67 challenge of the Congo that there would be at least 17 air bases, 9 foreign naval bases, 3 rocket sites, and an atomic testing range operated by NATO in North Africa, in addition to military missions in about a dozen other African countries, not to mention the exploitation of raw materials for the production of nuclear weapons occurring in the mines of Congo, Angola, South Africa, and Rhodesia. Nkrumah called for the urgent need to counter the challenge of NATO in the strategy he outlined in his Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which included the call for a military high command and an all-African People's Revolutionary Army, the AAPRA. The example of Portugal as one of the original members of NATO is worth exploring. The great freedom fighter of Africa, Amilcar Cabral, called Portugal a rotten appendage of imperialism, he said. Portugal's the most underdeveloped country in Western Europe. Portugal would never be able to launch 3 colonial wars in Africa without the help of NATO, the weapons of NATO, the planes of NATO, the bombs. It would be impossible for them. Cabral goes on to explain that the only reason Portugal was able to hold on to its colonies in Africa is because it had been a semi-colony of Britain since 1775, and Britain defended Portugal's interest during the partition of Africa. Furthermore, NATO, a creation of the U.S., uses Portugal and its colonies as a part of the larger objective of domination of Africa and the world. Portugal conducted a vicious war against its colonies in Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, Angola, and Mozambique, much like the U.S. did in Vietnam, and a whole bunch of other places. In both cases, colonizing powers used the most modern weapons, including napalm and cluster bombing campaigns, killing thousands against guerrilla armies that refused to bow down. The Portuguese dictator Marcelo Caetano was forced to give up economic interests in Angola to some of the NATO powers in exchange for the NATO armaments and supplies used. Yet, Portugal still lost the war against the heroic anti-colonial forces. You love to hear it. Yeah.
NATO's strategy of neo-colonialism.
Imperialism has always used its strategy of divide and rule. To enable the acceptance of the idea of a benevolent NATO, the colonial powers knew that they had to convince and recruit a neo-colonial class of indigenous Africans who would do their bidding. This divide played itself out on the national liberations movements between those who were friendly to imperialist forces and those who wanted a real break from colonialism. Wow, indeed. Nkrumah explains in Neo-Colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. All right, I gotta get this book. This is my next book. The wide array of methods employed by neo-colonialism, ranging from economic, political, religious, ideological, and cultural spheres. To do this, NATO works hand in hand with other mechanisms of imperialism like the CIA, which was instrumental in the coup against the Nkrumah government and the murder of Patrice Lumumba. And that needs to become an emote on this page. I think I need to refresh all my emotes with like just very 50s, 60s, people. I can't get enough of it. Nkrumah's neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. It's the last one, okay? There are no more after it. That's how this works. Don't argue with me. Let me pull this up on Goodreads. And then I'm gonna get it, I guess, at some point. And now. I'm gonna say the cover needs a little work. Not really very exciting. I'll have to get this soon. Not a great cover. What are you going to do? You can't win them all. They spent their time writing the content, not worrying about the cover. Mike Boy Raps, welcome in. Reading on. The settler colony of Azania and / South Africa would be another example of a NATO outpost. Azania? I don't know how to say that. From the beginning, it was obviously on the side of a Western NATO powers, since it was essentially a colony of Britain. Therefore, it was a NATO surrogate. Excuse me. In 1955, South Africa and Britain formulated the Simonstown Agreements, which contained provision for the naval surveillance and defense of the African continent from Cape to Cairo. In spite of a purported arms embargo, NATO countries and Israel also provided South Africa with the necessary technology to develop nuclear weapons. Oh, jeez. I had no idea. They're helping apartheid South Africa develop nukes? Is that what's going on? Is that what's going on there?
NATO and AFRICOM.
AFRICOM's actually a direct product of NATO via EUCOM. That's the U.S. European Command. Oh, I'm glad we're talking about this. EUCOM's a central part of NATO, originally took responsibility for 42 African states. In 2004, NATO ended a 5-year period of expansion. In 2007, the EUCOM commander proposed the creation of AFRICOM. Hey, Alyosha, welcome in. Good morning. James L. Jones Jr. explains how he came to make the proposal for AFRICOM from his position as commander of EUCOM, as well as commander of operational forces of NATO. Well, there you go. It's threaded right there. Seems bad. Buddyhead, love your face. Welcome in. Everyone say hi to Buddyhead. Everyone be nice. Everyone be nice to my friends. The U.S. NATO role in the destruction of Libya. Hey, we're reading about NATO and Africa. This is the article we're reading. Good to see you, buddy. What did I just do? What we're saying here. The U.S. NATO role in the destruction of Libya in 2011 is important to highlight. It offers some important lessons. First, U.S. imperialism and its Western lackeys do not accept any country that decides to be an independent force outside of its sphere of influence. It does not like that. The U.S. regime does not like that. The U.S. deep state hates that. If you're president and you step on people's toes, who've been, making plans for decades, even if you're the president, they'll fucking take you out. And they'll do it, and they'll get away with it. Think about it. All right, what are we saying here? Secondly, it also demonstrates how NATO can work hand in hand with other U.S. and Western-dominated world structures like the UN. I hate those guys. In 2011, the UN resolution in 1973 gave political authorization for a no-fly zone. Uh-oh. That means dogfights, right? And blockade of Libya purportedly to protect its citizens, but which ultimately resulted in the destruction of Africa's most prosperous country with the highest human development index. Way to go, guys. You fucking shit the bed again. Every shitty fucking time. Fuck yeah. Fucking idiots. U.S.-led NATO forces launched a bombing campaign that killed thousands of civilians and caused tens of billions of property and infrastructure damage. It's very hard to take people seriously who, lived through this and who said nothing about this, the bombing of Libya, and have everything to say about fucking Ukraine. I can't take them seriously. I mean, hell, even now they have a chance to go back and be like, "Oh yeah, that's pretty bad. You're right about that." But they don't even do that. They don't want to read, man. People want to learn through YouTube, and only fucking idiots would do that. By the way, make sure you catch this clip on YouTube later. I'm actually recording this. I'm gonna post it on YouTube. I think people should learn about this. Top of the hour ad break. I'm hitting the button. Please support the stream. You could be my first subby of the day. If you have Amazon Prime, you get a free gift. You get a free subby to your favorite channel. Otherwise, you can gift a sub. You can use about $5 and get a sub yourself. You can tip. You can buy merch. You can also support on Patreon, and you'll catch my chat with Buddyhead. Otherwise, you got to wait a week for it to drop on YouTube, and that's how that works. All right. Anyways, what am I saying here? Yeah. This shows that although U.S.-led NATO sometimes also uses the UN for political cover, it has no problem illegally overstepping. What is this, a link? Oh, I didn't realize those were links. What is this Nazi flag we got here? God damn it, I hate those Nazis. I hate Illinois Nazis. I'm on a mission from God. All right, I can't read this. I got to dip back. Go back. We've got to go back. Kate, we have to go back. It's not Penny's boat. I got lost. Because I zoomed in. Don't do that, Dan. Just stick to where you are. Stick to the lakes and the rivers that you used to. Yeah. I'm sorry. Right. Here. Yeah, they do the illegal shit. It has no problem illegally overstepping its U.S. mandate to commit its crimes against humanity and achieve its regime change goals. And there are stronger whispers that, what we're doing with Russia and Ukraine right now is we're hoping for Russian regime change. They're trying to get Putin out of there. Is that what's going on? I can't even speak to that. I gotta inform myself. Anyway, even a few countries that abstained from the UN vote, like China, said they did so as not to offend the reactionary Arab League and the African Union, which approved the resolution. In this case, indirect and direct cooperation between NATO, the UN, the AU, Arab Union, African Union, and the Arab League, which constitutes the GCC countries, shows the expansive and deeply woven web of U.S. and NATO reach. What are the GCC countries? Are you also like, what's that? Gulf Cooperation Council. Oh, everyone who's bombing Yemen. Oh, that's not funny. Don't laugh. Stop laughing. Don't encourage me. The book, The Illegal War on Libya, edited by Cynthia McKinney, includes the chapter titled NATO's Libya War, a Nuremberg-level crime, in which Stephen Ledman writes, the U.S.-led NATO war on Libya will be remembered as one of the history's greatest crimes, violating the letter and spirit of international law and America's Constitution. The Nuremberg Tribunal's Chief Justice Robert Jackson, a Supreme Court justice, called Nazi war crimes the supreme international crime against peace. Here are his November 21st, 1945 opening remarks with an English accent, just to make it confusing for you.
The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant, and so devastating, that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored, because it cannot survive their being repeated.
Jackson called aggressive war the greatest menace of our times. International law defines crimes against peace as planning, preparation, initiation, or waging of wars of aggression, or a war in violation of international treaties, agreements or assurances, or participation in a common plan or conspiracy for the accomplishment of any of the foregoing. Yeah. I've seen some really bad takes on like this whole Ukraine-Russia thing and like apologia for like working with Nazis. I've seen takes so bad they should be defined as war crimes themselves. Those mentioned here are but a small sampling of NATO and AFRICOM's bloody works in Africa's past. NATO continues to operate under the guise of the training and humanitarian peacekeeping assistance. Oh, yeah, we're sending lethal aid. Jihadist terrorist violence on the continent has increased since the founding of AFRICOM. Jesus Christ. Hey, what the fuck could go wrong when you make super desperate people even more desperate? And you introduce even more arms into the region. It's continued to increase since the founding of AFRICOM and NATO's destruction of Libya, resulting in civilian casualties and an instability which the West has used as pretext and justification for the continued need for AFRICOM. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. As the Black Alliance for Peace's AFRICOM Watch Bulletin reported, since the founding of AFRICOM, there has also been an increase in coups by AFRICOM-trained soldiers. Yeah. Jesus.
Oh, I couldn't say that. We were really surprised that they did a coup after we trained them how to do it. What are the chances they did a coup after we explicitly gave them the directions? We gave them little...
They probably like laminated directions, you know what I mean? They're just like, okay, nice and laminated. It can't get wet. Consistent with what Nkrumah, Rodney, and others warned of in the 60s and 70s, NATO continues today in the form of AFRICOM, facilitating wars, instability, and the corporate pillage of Africa. A little bit more context here, the day after the quote-unquote Russian invasion began at the end of February, the day after AFRICOM was bombing Somalia, and no one said shit about that. No one said shit about that. And then when we try to tell people about it, they're like, "Oh, you're using a redfish infographic. You're pretty much Russia." It's like, fuck yourself, man. What are you, pro NATO? You're running defense for NATO? What the fuck? What are you doing? Good morning, Easy Pronounce Time. Welcome in. consistent with what Nkrumah, right, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or the DRC, for example, is continuously plundered for strategic raw materials such as cobalt, tantalum. What the fuck is tantalum? Chromium, coltan, and uranium, etc. What are these things? I don't even know what this is. Tantalum. You're just making shit up. It's chemical element. It's atomic number 73? Get out of here. You're just going to sneak that in there? There was something else in that spot, and it was not tantalum. I swear to God, someone's doing a trick to me right now. It's a rare earth mineral. What's coltan? Short for columbite. Tantalites. Known industrially as tantalite, a dull black metallic ore from which the elements niobium and tantalum are extracted. Oh, that's how you get the tantalum. It's in the ore. So this is the ore. It's unprocessed, and this is and tantalum is processed. So you stop repeating yourselves. Okay. And uranium. And they had uses for uranium then. So they were taking the uranium and they were making their bowls glow. Am I making that up? Uranium bowls? Yeah. Look at these. Uranium glass. But of course, the bomb. And other nuclear powered stuff. Uranium glassware. It glows under all UV light. Uranium. Can you eat off it? Once. Only once. Just the one time. And that's all. I mean, all you need is once. Jadeite. Oh, it's not to be confused with jadeite. Don't confuse it. All right. Basic PJ, welcome in. Everyone follow PJ. Bro, that depleted uranium. It's pretty awesome. Yeah. I want to get my hands on it. I just want to dip my hands in it and then rub it on my face. I hear it's good exfoliant. Anyways, these minerals are strategically important not only for electronic devices, but also the technologies that drive the military-industrial complex. AFRICOM continues to rely on its neo-colonial African proxies to fight wars on its behalf in the DRC and throughout Africa to achieve its objectives. With the rise of China, the U.S. NATO now seek to ensure full spectrum dominance that seeks to shut China, or any other country out of the competition to control global capital. It's got some endnotes there. It's from MR Monthly Review. I hope you like that. Did you learn something? I hope so. All right, fade out.